I'm Gavin, and welcome to MLS Fantasy Picks.
Before we get into round 2 picks, let's do a fairly in-depth round 1 recap. Normally, I just do a quick one, but since it's the beginning of the season, we learned a lot this first round. I'll take some time, go through each of the matchups and see, what we learned from a fantasy standpoint. But before we do that, let's take a look at how I did for the week. So I landed on, I don't know why it's still being glitchy, I can't even see my team. I landed on 71 points for the week, so I've got an overall rank of 628, and obviously it being round 1, my week rank was also 628. My team value went up a bit, so as always, we all started out at 100 million, and now I'm at 101.8 million. So what went right for me for the week? Well, I was pleased to see my clean sheet with Daniel, so I got 8 points from San Jose. Hadebe as well for Cincinnati did well for me. Ojeda had a great score with the 11, and then Messi with the 9, Palencia with the 7, and Benteke 7 as well. So what went wrong? As you might have saw from my recap, I actually started with Yedlin and Espinoza. So unfortunately, I did some tinkering, as after Palencia hit, it freed up some budget for me, and I was able to sneak in Evander because I saw Hadebe was starting. Unfortunately, that was the absolute wrong move because I ended up, scrubbing Espinoza, kept Fagundes. Definitely would have been a nice swing of points, but hey, that's fantasy. Evander was like the best fantasy player last season, so I saw he was starting. Thought it would be a good play against, who were they against last week? Chicago? I can't even remember. But yeah, I thought it was a good play. Vander was starting. I think I'm going to give him some more time to see how he fits in with Cincinnati. But yeah, wasn't the best play there, or Shambo. And then, the Galaxy, Peck and Fagundes putting up 2 points each. So you could talk about what it could have, should have every single week with MLS Fantasy or any fantasy in general. But I think the best thing you can do is just, what do we learn from this week? For me, Evander, I'm going to give him some more time. Also, the Galaxy, we'll see how they pan out, but they may not be the same team without Puig and Paintsel currently. And remember, if you didn't have a great score this first round, this is a long season. I think looking at my videos last year, there were like 30 different fantasy rounds. So if you didn't have a good week, no worries. We've got double game weeks, MLS madness, anything can happen. So yeah, stick with it. So as I said before, I normally don't go super in depth, but it's round 1. There's a lot of change with the MLS season this year. So let's talk through, what we learned from a fantasy standpoint with each of these matchups. So I'll go through each team from the matchups last week, spend a couple seconds going through, what we learned from some different players. So getting started, taking a look at LAFC, they played Minnesota at home last week. What we did learn was we've got, I think, what's his name? Santos. He was not that expensive last week. I think he was 5.8. So now he's sitting at 6.3. But yeah, one of the cheaper defenders for LAFC, if you want to look at him. And also Martinez and Ordaz. So Ordaz is a cheaper forward. Martinez looked really good as well, getting 4 points, with no goal contributions. So I don't see either of them going the full 90, but with rotations for CONCACAF Champions League, they could be some good budget options for the season. And yeah, Minnesota, not too much to call out. Kelvin Yeboah still looks dangerous. We didn't see much as Minnesota didn't score, but I think he had a rip off the inside of the post. So yeah, I still feel like Yeboah will be a great option this year. So hopping over to our next game, I think that was Miami and NYCFC. So that was an interesting game due to the red card, but obviously still look at Messi. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, we'll see. It was the first game. Suarez and Alba both with 1. Alba with a bad mess up in the back. So yeah, don't see that too often, but keep an eye out for these 3 throughout the season. Let's hop over to NYCFC. So Martinez is a great striker option if, timing matchups work out. He's always been very dangerous, at least for New York last season. So I would continue to look at him, if matchups look good. Not necessarily away at LAFC this week, but I think he's still a good look. Now moving over to the Atlanta game. So unfortunately, I'm recording this on a Tuesday, and Latte Lath is still not in the game, which is quite upsetting because he looked dangerous. Atlanta are going to be pretty dangerous this season, especially with Almiron and Latte Lath up top. So Almiron looked good. Latte Lath is going to be strong in this league. He's still not in the fantasy game, so we'll give that some time. Hopefully he's back, or hopefully he's in the game this week. But yeah, Atlanta looks strong. And then they played Montreal. And yeah, they got a budget option. Prince, I think he had some good goal contributions there. Saliba, so you got a good couple of budget options as well if the matchups look right for Montreal. Hopping over to Cincinnati. So Yedlin, he'll get you some price rises. I don't know if I like him at Philly, but his price will most likely increase even if you put him on your bench. Denke is the real deal. He looked great. So yeah, I'll keep an eye out for him. And yeah, Evander, I'm going to give it some time. I'll see how he clicks with the squad eventually. And then we've got the Red Bull. Oh yeah, maybe it was the Red Bull that Cincinnati played. Honestly, didn't learn too much. I just watched the highlights of this game. So yeah, we'll see if they click and how well they do against Nashville. Forsberg and Morgan are usually pretty strong fantasy players, as well as Harper in the midfield, more of a budget option. Yeah, so we'll keep an eye out on the Red Bull. And now hopping over to the Crew. So yeah, I think the Crew played Chicago. And yeah, Rossi looked good. 16 points is fantastic any week in MLS Fantasy. It was a weird game though. Some strange goals there. Russell Rowe, also a good option. Moreira getting on the attack, so I always like him. So yeah, we'll see how the Crew continue to do. But yeah, they look pretty good against a Chicago squad. And speaking of Chicago, very impressed with Gutierrez. I do like him this week against DC, only 8.3 million. He had quite a nice long shot from outside the box, just a banger. Yeah, so Gutierrez is looking good. Another player who I'm also hoping they add to this game would be, what was his name? Bamba. Bamba looked very dangerous on the wing, similar to like a Joseph Paintsel, very fast, created a lot of great chances for this team. So hopefully he gets added to the game and we can continue to take a look at him from a fantasy standpoint. Hopping over to DC. So yeah, I mean, DC's DC. Usually you look at Benteke, who got his goal. He's usually good for a header. But Jacob Murrow, I think he got involved, with a goal contribution. Very cheap. If he gets the start, keep an eye out for him. He could be a sneaky play this fantasy season. And then Toronto. It's Toronto. Bernadeschi is your only option, really. At least that I'm looking at for now. Hopping over to Orlando. So yeah, I was very happy to see the Union get their win against Orlando. Ojeda is definitely the guy this year, getting 11 points. Love to see that from the 10. But also, I think Pasalic was his name. He looked very dangerous as well. So yeah, hopefully he gets added to the fantasy game. I think he'll be a great option for fantasy managers. And of course, my favorite team, Philadelphia Union, Baribo, Gazdag, and Ua all getting involved up top. You love to see it. They're not too expensive. Baribo, hopefully he continues in his good form. And at 7.8, come on. Great option this week. So yeah, keep an eye out for these three. Also, Wagner, always a great defensive option because he's involved in the attack. He's on set pieces. I'm more fans of Baribo and Gazdag than Ua myself. But yeah, we'll keep an eye out on these players throughout the season. So the Austin game, I watched the highlights, but honestly, you guys let me know if you watched the whole game. This Bukhari goal looked like a fluke, so it's good to see he got some bonus points somewhere else. So congrats to those players that did start him. But I would want to see more from this squad, but I didn't get much from the highlights. Let me know if Austin is looking dangerous in any particular area. Same for SKC. Didn't learn much from them. Just need to see a bit more from them this season before I start picking any players from Kansas City. Houston. Where's Houston? Amin Bassi. So Bassi was a good sneaky play last season. I think he was on penalties, so we'll see who's on penalties this year. McGlynn, love to see a 7 with no goal contribution, so he could be that Hector Herrera type of role. And Ezekiel Ponce. So yeah, also the goal contribution. I think these three will probably be the most favored guys from a Houston standpoint for fantasy. But they do have Miami this week. And let's hop over to Dallas. So Dallas, Musa, definitely the guy. I think it was another fluke goal. And we haven't really seen much from Lucho yet, so keep an eye out for Dallas. For Nashville, I honestly was surprised to see no goals in that matchup against the Revolution. I thought that Hani looked great. Obviously, he got a 7 with no goals, so I like to see that. And Surge had plenty of chances. So, yeah, keep an eye out on these guys as usual. Also, you can see it's a bit different this year. So, I think we've got like the 50K range. So, we're getting some rounded scores or rounded budget changes. So, yeah, a bit different this year with budget. Just keep an eye on that. Sorry to sidetrack. Let's hop over to New England. Yeah, I want to see a bit more from them. Heel with the 4 isn't great. I expect to see more from him, maybe against Columbus this week. I'm a huge fan of Heel and St. Louis. So Kessler, honestly. I mean, he got the clean sheet, he got some other bonus points. He was quite involved from a fantasy standpoint. Keep an eye out for him. Hartel also looked good with a 6 and no goal contributions. So you like to see that. And honestly, looking at the highlights, Betcher, the striker, had a lot of chances. I don't think he'll go the full 90, but if you need that budget option, he could be a sneaky play here and there. And moving on to the Rapids. I mean, I didn't see too much with them. They came off of CONCACAF. I think they got the draw, it looks like, with the clean sheets here. Yeah, so I want to see more with them since they're playing in CONCACAF. But you got some cheap defensive options here with Awazium. So yeah, keep an eye out for them, even though they do have the CONCACAF Champions Cup going on. And let's hop over to San Jose. Absolutely crushed me to see that huge score from SB without starting him. I think the big learning here is Ricketts. Most likely will be on my bench this following season, or this following week. I'll see how it works out. But he got a 13. He was only 4 mil. His price will keep rising. So if you want to keep raising your budget, play him for the next couple of weeks, and he will increase your team's budget. So yeah, SB's still the guy. Not much from Chicho or Joseph. So keep an eye out for these guys. And RSL didn't look good, but I did see Ruiz got an 8 with no goal contribution. So also you like to see that from fantasy standpoint. They're at home against Seattle. Keep an eye out for Ruiz. He's not too expensive. And then Seattle, they're also in CONCACAF Champions League. I expect to see rotation. They got a lot of depth. Rusnak, still strong. JMO, stepping up. I like these guys. Just keep an eye out for lineups, as usual, with Seattle. And Charlotte. Didn't learn too much. I'm excited to see Zaha. I like Ajiman this week with an early game against Atlanta, who defensively let in a few goals against Montreal. And yeah, we'll see how Zaha works in. Finish up with a week. Portland. It's hard to tell. It was a weird game. It looks like Anthony got a goal. But yeah, red card game. Hard to learn a lot. Rough game for Portland. The same for Vancouver. I mean, one of their players, I think it was Nelson, not even available right now to select, but obviously like 4 goal contributions. So yeah, see if when he gets added. But Ryan Gauld, definitely that guy still. They're playing the Galaxy, it looks like, so definitely a good option with Gauld. Yeah, weird game. Red card games are hard to learn from for fantasy. And then the Galaxy, not looking good for them after that game against San Diego, so I might avoid them for a bit until Pooch comes back. And then finishing off with San Diego, who we have a couple of players to select from. So honestly, until Dreyer gets added to the game, not a lot of decent options. I mean, you got Chucky here. But yeah, I think Dreyer will be a great shout for fantasy. And then Dos Santos is a good cheap keeper. I got that clean sheet there, so that's good to see. So that wraps up my learnings from round 1. Let me know what you guys think if I didn't cover anything. I only watched the highlights for all the other games except the Union. But yeah, it was exciting to see how the MLS season may look this year. All right, now let's hop over into some player picks for the week. All right, so before we get into our round 2 picks, as always, let's go through some key considerations for round 2. So it is a CONCACAF Champions Cup this week. So anyone new to MLS, this is our Champions League. We play different teams around the region. So I think we've got about 8 different MLS teams. This also includes your Vancouver, Miami, LAFC, some big teams in there. So keep an eye out. I think games are like Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. See who's starting, because this may impact our fantasy players for the week. They may get rested, they may get rotated. So yeah, just keep an eye out. Again, no teams on bye this week since we've got our even number of teams. And then injury suspensions. There were a couple of red cards last week. I don't think anyone that we really look at from a fantasy standpoint, but as always, just keep an eye out as you set your lineups when the MLS drops their injury and suspension report. And getting started with our premium keepers for the week. So I like Lloris versus NYC. I think they've got the late game, so it's a good fallback option for Keeperoo if you have the money and want to spend it. Backup option from a premium standpoint, I like Stefan. They're playing Dallas. I feel like Dallas is still, figuring out who they are with Acosta, and Stefan's coming off that clean sheet. So I like Stefan from a premium standpoint. So looking at standard options, a bit cheaper. You've got Dos Santos from San Diego playing St. Louis. I don't love it. I feel like St. Louis are probably going to score. They're looking pretty good. So, yeah, but he's only 6'5". The option I do like the most this week, I think, is Takaoka with Vancouver. So they're at home against the Galaxy, who doesn't look too great, and Takaoka is only a 6.1. And honestly, I don't really recommend a budget keeper for the week. I think you've got Miami against the Dynamo. So you could still work with Ustari, who probably is still $4 million. If we take a look here. Yeah, so he's still $4 million. Maybe you go a Takaoka to Ustari, but yeah, not a lot of good options from a budget standpoint this week. Looking at premium defenders, so I like Wagner this week. He had a good score with the 7 last week, and they're playing Cincinnati. Expect to see good things from Wagner. Malanda, he's expensive, but he has that early game against Atlanta. And then Bongi Halongwane from Minnesota. Not a great score last week, but he's on that attacking side for Minnesota, and they're playing Montreal. Could be some good options there. And then Veselinovic. So he's only 6'8", but still more of a pricey type of defender. They're playing the Galaxy at home, so a good fallback option for some switcheroos. Then from a standard price option, I think these guys are good picks because they had great scores last week, so most likely to give you a price rise. And they have good matchups, so LAFC versus NYC, as well as Vancouver versus LA. Good chances for clean sheets, I think, and these players, they've shown they can perform. So some good options this week from a standard standpoint. All right, so for budget defender picks, Ricketts definitely, even if you throw him on your bench, they're playing SKC. He got a 13. He's going to give you a price rise. Owazium for Colorado, I feel, has a good matchup against Dallas, so I think he's a good pick, not too expensive. And Hadebe from Cincinnati. I feel like Philly might score. They look pretty good against Orlando, but Hadebe at least will get you that price rise. So yeah, good options at defense this week. So call me crazy, but premium midfielders I'm not really looking at this week, probably except Gauld. So Gauld, Vancouver versus LA, they look good. I think that's a good option. He's not too expensive with 9. And then Heel, we may want to see a bit more from New England before I drop that kind of cash for just, we only got 4 points last week. I think there's a lot of good, mid-price, standard price type of guys this week to look at for fantasy, even budget. So yeah, I wouldn't drop too much cash for those premium mids this week. I mean, you also could argue Mr. Rusnak with 8.8, but he is away at RSL, so also with the CONCACAF rotation, not too sure, so a bit on the fence with Rusnak. So this is where I'm looking at this week, mainly those standard type of price guys, not too expensive, coming off some strong weeks as well, so probably going to get you a good amount of points. So I like Ojeda at home against Toronto, beautiful. Same here, Gutierrez at home against DC, love that. Gazdag at home against Cincinnati, 8.3, coming off a 9, looks great. McGlynn, Houston versus Miami, a bit on the fence there last game of the week, so I'll probably use Jack as a fallback if I do. And then Espinoza, a 10 against SKC, who don't look too great. Not my favorite because he is away, but someone to look at because of that, 10 he got last week for a price rise. And your budget midfielders, I don't have too many here. I like a lot of the standard price range type of guys. Pablo Ruiz, with an 8 and no goal contributions, you love to see that. So he's at home against Seattle. Maybe they're a bit rotated. Could be a good option for Ruiz. And then Vite as well, 7.5. Strong points across the board here against Portland. Now they're playing LA. Could be a good pick for the week. And premium forwards, your usual suspects, Messi, Buanga. Messi coming off a 9, so a bit better option than Buanga's 4. I think, did he lose money? Yeah, not too much. So yeah, I like these two. They're expensive, so take a pick. Your standard price strikers. So you got Brian White, 8.1 against LA. Got a 5, so not awful. Baribo, a bit more tempting with that 11 points. Sure to get you a price rise against Cincinnati. I like Baribo this week. And then Ajiman, a 4. Let's see. Yeah, no change in his value here. But yeah, against Atlanta at home, good bench play with the early game. Could be a good look. For budget forwards, I don't feel like you have to go this cheap this week, but if you need someone to throw in there, Forster Ajago from Real Salt Lake is playing. And then the early game against Seattle, so if you need someone to like check their points on the bench, could be an option. Not a huge fan of him. And then Ordaz, if LAFC is, rotating due to Champions Cup, only 5.6 could be a good late option if you need it. And finishing off with our captain picks for the week, I like Ryan Gauld. He's at home against LA, and they are playing on Sunday, so not ideal with the very late game at 5 o'clock, but he should play. Well, hopefully, I know they have Champions Cup, so keep an eye out for Vancouver. Same with Buanga, LAFC with the late game against New York City. Could be a decent option. And then Messi as well. Miami's got Houston, the last game of the week. So hopefully Messi plays. Because if you got that captain's armband on them and then he doesn't, you would have to switch. So this is where it gets interesting for, fantasy managers. You have to sort of take a risk. Like, do you wait for Messi, see if he plays? Keep an eye out for news and things like that. But I feel like you can't go wrong with either of these. Any of these 3 guys here. So yeah, that wraps up round 2 player picks. So let me know if I missed anything from round 1. Is there anything that you guys learned that I didn't call out? I feel like this is going to be a great fantasy season, especially once all those exciting players get added, like Latte Loth. So hopefully that gets sorted this week. And yeah, round 2 is going to be an interesting one. We've got CONCACAF Champions Cup. We've got some late games. Yeah. It'll be good. So, as always, good luck.